One thing I love about people is the more you get to know them, the more layers unpeel in their story. And there's things we see from the outside, but then we learn about their experiences and they become even more interesting. Today's guest is an expert on spotting those layers. Jason Frazell is an executive coach and facilitator serving high-impact people and teams in technology, and a personal brand strategist for CEOs, executives, entrepreneurs, and side hustlers. Jason's a founder of Jason Frazell Coaching, where he offers one-on-one executive and leadership coaching, group programs, speaking, and workshops. He's a coach in a premier communications and sales training organization, and he's worked with companies such as Meta, Amazon, Google, and Spotify. Jason, you're the real deal. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Lisa. Every time I hear my own intro, I go, is that really me? Thank you for the lovely intro. I am so glad to have this conversation with you and with the audience today.
Yes, and for those in the audience, you'll notice that Jason and I, you're going to notice we have a bit of more familiarity than I do with some of my guests. Jason and I are in a mastermind. We've been in a mastermind for about 3 years, so a couple times a year we get to see each other in person. But we're just going to have a fun conversation today.
Yeah, thanks. Can't wait, Lisa.
Okay, well, so, there's a lot of people out there who are dreaming of one day leaving corporate America, right? So they're sitting in their offices or sitting, behind their Zoom screen, and they're dreaming of that day where they can do their own thing, be their own boss. And this was a little bit of your story where you were able to start a side hustle. So what would you say to that person who is thinking about growing a business on the side?
Yes, that was me. And if you have a calling for it, the first thing I always like to look at is what for. If it's to make more money quickly, I may want to reframe that politely. If it's for autonomy, family shifts, responsibilities, wonderful. And if it's because you really want to make an impact that's more you, I go for it. One of the things that one of my soapboxes is people that go and want to work for themselves purely for the money. And Lisa, you know this as well.
Yeah.
It's probably not the right reason. You can make a ton of money. There are lots of personal brands who work for themselves, make a ton of money, and you generally don't when you start. And the other thing I would say is, are you ready to be the dishwasher and the floor sweeper and the accountant and the marketer and the coach and the consultant and your own therapist? Because you also run all those roles. I just get, for the audience, a tiny bit of background. I came from corporate sales. I worked at some really big companies with almost unlimited resources. Then I worked at some startups with more limited resources, but I had resources that weren't me that I could go to for things. And it was a tremendous emotional shift for me and quite painful to sit and go, oh, this is just me. I hate doing these things, but I either need to pay somebody to do these things, but I'm not making much money, or do them myself, and I don't really know how. So I always just ask people the what for is the big thing to start. The big thing to start.
Yeah, that is one thing I love about working with you, Jason, is when ask a question, like, the right questions to ask in return. That's that coach coming out in you and really make us think deeper. So when we think about going into that, there's challenges that we face besides wearing all the hats, right? Which is not fun. We don't have people anymore, right? We don't have people, we don't have a place to go to, and we often don't have the funds to do it. But what were some of the challenges that you faced besides that? Maybe even like knowing who to serve, or I don't want to lead you there, but what are some of the other things?
Yeah. We only have 45 minutes in this podcast. Like, we could do 3 hours on the challenges I've faced. I'm going to bottom line. My major challenges were going from a successful sales career to not really making any money for a while was very hard for me, emotionally, mentally, and I took it very personally because I was selling my services. I wasn't selling a piece of software anymore. So that was hard. I went into a bit of a dark place and needed some additional therapeutic and coaching support just to break those contexts up and normalize my experience, because I've always been a high achiever, very passionate and driven. And then when you sit there and you go, but I'm good at this, but nobody's here. That's like the emotional and mental part. The other thing, and you said this, and I went through a really, I'm biased, but a really good coach training program, year long, 168 hours, 40 some hours of practice coaching, like intense training work and personal development work. And what was hard for me is coming to the realization that going through a coach training program isn't enough to be a successful coach. Because what you just said, if nobody knows you or knows what you do or how you actually help them, nobody's likely going to part with their hard-earned dollars and time and energy. And another soapbox of mine is that just because you're a good coach, you need to be able to articulate the actual thing you do for people, not I can coach people on anything about anything. And the truth is good coaches can, because good coaches ask questions, bring curiosity, hold space for people. But people don't buy because you ask good questions. They don't do business with you. They ask because you move them forward in a way in what they want. And that was hard for me too, because in most coach trainings, and I helped lead that coach training for 3 years. You come in with a context that I know I did and a lot of other coaches do, is like, oh, I learned how to coach, then I just go coach people. And some people do because they have big networks and such. But for most of us, you need to learn who you're best to serve personality-wise, and less about what they do, but more about how they show up. For me, it's more about how they show up. You read some of the places I've done work at, but I've coached people in almost every industry you can name. It's less about that. It's more about what they're up to and getting clear about, and this is for anybody who wants to run a business that's kind of like what you and I do, Lisa, which is we serve people and we're one-on-one with people or group people. What kind of people do you want to spend time with? Want to spend time with this? We talked a little bit about the mastermind, and that's been a huge shift for me from spending time with people that just weren't aligned with my energy. We didn't want to be there. And that was a huge drag too. So yeah, just getting clear about like the kind of people, I'm much more interested in somebody's psychographics than I am in their demographics. I really don't care about the demographics most of the time.
Yes. And I think, we can categorize people if we look at what industry they're in or how much money they make, but it's really how they do show up. And I want to go back to something you said about, you're an expert in your industry. And that's one of the biggest things when I've just talked to new entrepreneurs or people who are pretty early into that journey. They are shocked at how hard it is because it's almost like you come down from the mountain, right? You've reached this pinnacle, You've reached this state of expertise to where you are highly respected and regarded. And all of a sudden you walk out and first of all, nobody cares that you've done that.
Yeah.
He knows you. And so then you're trying to face and deal with all that. But I like the part about who do you want to spend time with? Because as you do this work, particularly when you're starting out, you're trying to navigate that messy middle of what offer do I want to have and who do I want to work with and who needs it? And if you have people who are showing up that trigger you or just the thought, seeing their name on your calendar, if you see the name on the calendar and you're not excited about meeting with that person,
in there. Yeah.
People like that is a warning sign.
Yeah.
That is a warning sign. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say one of the things Michael Port, you might know who Michael Port is. Him and his wife run Hero Public Speaking. Some of our friends have gone through that program. Yeah. Michael Port has the concept of a velvet rope policy in his book, Book Yourself Solid. And it's about even when you're in scarcity mode and you need the money, maintain who gets to come into your club because it ain't worth it. And yes, we all need to make money, but it ain't worth it because this is a really stinky job. If you're with people that either don't appreciate you don't appreciate them, etc.
And I think we've all been there. I can think immediately of the one person that taught me that lesson. It was pretty early on. And I met her at a networking event. And I should have known when she said, I just can't find the right person to help me figure out how to do this, right? Well, I'm really confident. I'm good at what I do. I'm like, I gotcha. Well, we were about 3 sessions in and I realized why she couldn't find the right person because she was the right person and no one else knew what they were doing. So really valuable lesson. I gave her money back.
Yeah, exactly. There's a great saying around that. I think I saw it on a TV show was, if you go out in the world and you meet an asshole, you might just meet an asshole. If you meet a whole bunch of assholes, you're probably the asshole.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when we look at the entrepreneurial journey, it really is a roller coaster. So we've got days that are really great. We've got days where we're just hauling ourselves around to get through the day and try to find that, like, where was that spark I had yesterday? What are some things you do to light you up?
Yeah. I'll just give everybody my rhythm of I call it the rhythm of my business, how I do it. I generally don't look at my calendar until the morning of. Mm-hmm. And based on what's on my calendar, I have a feeling about what's on my calendar. So for example, I'm like, I'm recording with Lisa today. Amazing. Like, I love doing podcasts. I'm a fellow podcaster.
Yes.
And based on that, if I'm feeling lower energy, either because what's on my calendar, or should be clear, what's not on my calendar. Too much for me. I have a trigger for too much space in my calendar because coming from a sales background, I'm forever going to be breaking up my sales context that busy equals success. That's the other thing for people listening out there that you asked about before. Busy does not equal success as an entrepreneur all the time. There are times when I've been slammed and I've made almost no money. There's times when I've had a ton of space and made the most money. So like, it's an energy thing. But what I do is, it's pretty simple. I will spend time with the kids, which is great. We have a 3-year-old at home, not for much longer. He's going up to school in the fall. I will play guitar generally. So I'll pick up my guitar and play for a few minutes, just riff, and I'll listen to music and I'll walk. I'm a movement person. I'm a musician. And so doing those things, even if I'm not feeling it, will generally, like, those are the things that will generally source me up to a point where I'm good to go. And then the other thing too is through coach training and and we're going to talk about personal development, I'm pretty good at sourcing myself and showing up when I need to. Like, I think this is something you and what you do now, but also as a background as an educator, you have to learn to do that. You're like, in some ways, it doesn't matter how I feel because Lisa's paying me for an hour of my time,
right? And
I need to be there for her. So I'm good at that, but I do know the things to source me up ahead of time. And then my favorite thing is hang out with the dog because she just I get immediately love from the golden retriever. No matter what, she loves me no matter what's on my calendar.
Isn't that something? Yeah, that's one of the great things about having a dog. But you know what I hear in your answer, Jason, like, I'm noticing the creativity that comes through the music. And it did not escape me that you talked about the rhythm of your calendar or rhythm of your day, because I know that is a really important part for you. And moving your body, like getting out in nature, spending time with people. You are probably the person, when I think of you, the cartoon character I think of is Tigger, okay, from Winnie the Pooh, because you're just like, you find the joy, you find the fun. If there's fun to be had in any event, you're going to find it. So hanging out with you, I know it's always going to be a good time. And we're going to be able to.
I'm glad you didn't say Eeyore, because that would be the exact opposite.
No, I used to work with someone who was like Eeyore, and I can spot that a mile away. Oh yes. Oh,
me too.
Yeah. Which is
like,
one
here's
of the
here's $1 million. Yeah, but I have to pay more tax then.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in improving cultures, because I saw what that did to an organization.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, I know you work with a lot of executives and entrepreneurs. What are some maybe blind spots that we just plow through that you can spot a mile away?
I wish I could say, I'm the master at spotting all these. Some blind spots that people have are they're perceived as an asshole. I will say this is not to get too stereotypical, but this is a more male thing. I think males can get away with being more of an asshole in the workplace. I was having a conversation with a really cool guy who does horse coaching work, and he'll bring, and I've never heard of this before. It was very cool. I didn't know about it, but he said, you ever want to know the truth about yourself? Go hang out with horses. And I'm not a horse person, but he said, I'll bring groups of executives, and there will be certain people, usually men, the horse will not interact and they will walk away from them. Because horses, dogs, like my dog will love every single person on the planet unless they actually hurt her. He's like, horses, like some people will pet them and they'll love them. They'll eat out of their hands. And some people, he goes, and so I think to answer your question, some blind spots is like, you're more of an asshole than you think you are. Or people know that you're glad handing them. You're not actually as nice as you are. You don't care as much by how you show up in meetings. The other big blind spot that all of us have is what will you do when we're triggered and how easily other folks can read it. Because as humans, we biologically designed to be like, oh, Lisa's kind of upset right now. And you're like, no, I've got a stoic face. You're like, but we can tell you're upset. And so that's a big one. And just like being aware of your go-to, like we all have our go-to when we get triggered. What is that thing? And then we get a chance to either own it. Hey, I'm really under pressure right now. I apologize for being short. Like me, I know me when I'm stressed, I get short, very short. And even more to the point, other people do the opposite. They ramble. And like knowing that about ourselves. And the last thing I would say is the big blind spot is how good a boss people think they are. Oh, yeah. And this, I mean, I forget who did that. It was a Korn Ferry or McKinsey did a study. It's like, it was something like 81% of all managers surveyed said they're great managers. And then they surveyed the employees. It was like 31%. And I think it's normal. It's normal. And I would assert those people are somewhere in the middle. Probably most people are in the middle. They're not because employees are going to bring their own biases. They might be unhappy about their pay that their boss has no control over and then all that. But I think the other blind spot may be, are you as good a leader as you think you are? Because it's not just about the results. And are you meeting your team's needs? And I'm not talking about comp and all that. And I'm a little more old school. I don't believe a company has to meet all our needs. But if Lisa works for me and I know that she is a words of affirmation person, I should be shouting her out in front of the team in the team meetings. If Jason is more of a quality time person, which I am, I should be spending a little extra time mentoring him to help him feel like he's receiving those. And I think a lot of bosses make the excuse of I don't have time. Leaders make I don't have time or I know how. It's like I always say this. There's a real pro tip to finding out. And Lisa, you know what the pro tip is. Ask them.
Yes.
Imagine that, right? I mean, and you were an educator, ask students, what's the best way to reach to you? Like, what's your learning style? Like, actually just have people tell you as opposed to try to guess.
Well, and I think that brings up a really important thing is, a lot of what I heard you say in this is playing off people's energy. When you talk about horses, horses are supposed to have this incredible intuitive
unbelievable sense. Yeah.
Which is why we have horse therapy and all of those things, which I'm very curious about. But it's not just the energy that we can tell somebody is upset. Maybe it's just even how their eyes look. Or I know you and I have been on a call very early on when I was in the mastermind, and you even followed up with me like, hey, are you okay? Right?
Yeah.
It was a long time ago. But really when we're looking at that, it's the requirement that now more than ever, we really need to be thinking about the people that we serve, whether it's our clients, whether it's our team members. And a lot of times when we show up, this I'm the great boss versus how the employee perceives you, it's all about you. But we have to understand maybe that all about me time has to be before you get into the meeting, before you get on the call. How do you start your day? How you ground yourself? So I really appreciate that. But what are you seeing as you're working with executives today? You were talking about like men get a little bit of a pass to be more of an asshole or more aggressive. What are you seeing today in leaders now that we've seen a lot of shift in our employees who, that employee of 2019 no longer exists. We've got a new breed.
Yeah. Leaders don't know how to do it either most of the time. They're not getting a lot of support from above because their leaders don't know how to do it either, all the way up to the CEO. They don't really know how. I think the thing I would say is most people don't really know how to do it. And I'm sure I know people that are high up in organizations. So do I. The behind closed doors will tell you, I don't really know what I'm doing. Like they do. They're confident. They have a lot of expertise, But when it comes to the softer part of business and leadership, they don't really know either. And so I think one of the things that is, and this is for people who are people leaders, is give yourself some grace that there's not always answers. And this is where you and I share a common language around who are you being, and like what we can always control. Can't always control who we're being. We can control how we show up to a point, or control that. Hey, I'm showing up. I'm not feeling great today. I know you've done positive intelligence work. So if I like, hey, my hyperachiever is on blast right now, Lisa, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to own it. So that's what's coming up for me. So I'm noticing a lot of that. I'm also noticing there's more pressure to deliver on results with less. Now, I do a lot of work in tech, obviously big tech layoffs in 2021. And there's a lot of technology innovations going on there. So it's like do more with less people, keep your people motivated, but also work them hard, but also they don't get a pay raise this year, but we need them to do more with less. And it's on you as the leader to figure that out. Let us know if you need help. Hey, I need help. What do you think? Like, so a lot of that. And then there's a big shift for folks around, for me, it's like removing the whole term around work-life balance and just making it all a thing. It's like your work is just part of who you are and what you do. The whole thing around like your work shouldn't define you. I think it's kind of BS in some ways. Like, of course it defines you. You spent 12 years in regular school. Most people I work with went to at least 4 years of college to learn a specific thing. And most of them do something in that to tell people like, well, don't let it define you. Agree. Don't let it define you as the only thing, but own that as part of your identity and like actually own that. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be defined by that fact. I'm a software engineer. Yeah, but right. You spend 50 hours of your week doing that and you do it for fun on the side. So why would that not partially define you? And then the last thing is, and this is, something that you and I share, is most everybody I've worked with, they're good people. They're good people. They want the best for their team. They want to be respected. They want to be seen as good leaders, and they want to drive good culture because it is known that good culture matters, but they don't know how. They don't know how because they don't know what people actually care about. And I'll just say this to anybody listening here who's like leadership development, HR, posters on office walls, nobody cares. Fun little emails, cake in the break room, that's nice. But what you should ask your team what they want. And it's not always, everybody likes more money. Most people like more money, but ask them what they want. It goes back to like, hey, what would be a meaningful thing we could do for you, Lisa, as part of this team? You did a great job last quarter. What would be meaningful? Oh, I'd love to be recognized in the all hands meeting. Great. We can make that happen. And I'm seeing a shift around that. Like what are things I can do for my folks knowing that I can't give them a pay raise? It's just not a thing, especially in like startup world where you're privately funded and it's just not a thing. So those are some of the trends. I mean, there's always a million things, but those are the top things that I hear a lot about.
Yeah. And I think the thing is just be human, like be authentic, be real. I don't mean tell them all your scars or tell them all what's going on, but just, hey, this is where I'm coming from today. And I think a lot of leaders feel like they have to put on this front. They have to have this wall up, that they have this power and respect. That's gone. That was last century. People want to work for people that they can have conversations with, that they can be human with, that they can be just really talk about what they're struggling with or what's going to motivate them. I think to open up those doors and do that. So I love that you're doing that with people and encouraging that to happen, because we need more of that. We need a lot more of that.
One quick anecdote. This is about my wife. Her boss, her peer has become her boss. And her boss, one of the first days says, he's like, I can't do this job without you. We need more bosses to say that to their employees.
Yes.
Not only do I want you, do I want the results you generate, but I need you because as a leader, I can't do this without you. As leaders can't do without the people.
Yeah, they really can't. And to be told that, to know how valued you are in that, That would be very compelling. I mean, I'd work all day long for that person doing
exactly.
that.
Lisa,
Yeah.
I need you. I need you. Not
Yeah.
even I want you. Not I need your results though. I need you because you, Lisa, are the secret sauce in this role.
Are the one who brings it. And you know what you talked about, like this whole work-life balance. I think we need to take that term and throw it out the window. There is not a balance. Yeah. There is not. I mean, if you're showing up, bringing your best to work, it's the people. That's you. It doesn't mean you have to do it 24/7, but we were created to work. That's one thing we were given these skills and gifts and talents and the ability to learn in a certain way. There's a reason why. And when we can bring that into our work, you can't separate that. So when people talk about, your professional development and personal development, I really don't think there's a difference in that.
No. Oh, absolutely not. Well, two things. One, this is what separates us. One of the things that separates us from animals, besides some of our emotions, is that we get to choose what we do. Animals don't. Mm-hmm. My dog doesn't get to choose whether she wants to dig in. She chooses it, but she's like, I'm going to dig in the ground. She digs in the ground. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe I'll dig in the ground. Maybe I want to go climb a tree. That's the first thing. And the second thing there that you said, and what's the last thing you said right there? Because it struck me and then I lost it.
That we were created to do work that this is what we were. Professional personal development. That's what I was talking about.
Oh yeah. I'm so into that. The saying I love, and I learned this from my coach training program, is how it shows up in one area of our life is how it shows up everywhere. So if I'm doing professional development around my creativity or my speaking skills, my communication, I do a lot of communications training. You think people that come through communications training don't end up communicating more effectively with their spouse at home? I mean, come on. Of course.
Right. I'm going to leave that at work. And when I get
I'm going to
home,
be a great speaker at work. And then at home, I'm going to be, no, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, you really are. So you are really committed to personal development, as am I. We get together and what have you done lately? And what, this new thing. Why have you made such a commitment to that, Jason?
I think because for so long I didn't. I was a typical corporate employee, went through trainings, say in some ways coasted by on talent. I was pretty good at what I did without having to work. It never felt like I had to work very hard. And that goes back to the other thing as an entrepreneur. I'm like, wow, this feels really hard.
Yeah.
I love it. I enjoy it. I will be honest that there is a part of my personality that it's a fix for not feeling good enough. What's the next thing? I think I'm sure a lot of people that are listening could probably identify what's the next program? What's the next thing? And I will say I've done a better job of really narrowing down my focus on who I spend time with and what kind of things I learn. I love it because I know I'm so far from having really about anything figured out. And and selfishly, the work I do, when I learn from other people, it helps me then deliver that. I get to I've reused stuff on this podcast today that is not my own. Hopefully I've attributed it, but there's always something there. And then I know that I'm just cracking who I'm meant to be in this world. And as somebody who's done a lot of therapy and a lot of coaching, and I'm 46, I'm working against 46 years of programming. Up until I started my journey with my first coach and getting a therapist, I was dealing with 41 years of programming with no support, really, just operating in the world, which is great. And I grew up going to church, so I'm operating against some of that programming, some of the things you learn there. And there's nothing wrong with any of that. I think that's a great part of my personality, but just knowing that there's always, and for me, it's not so much about performance. It's about the best version of myself. Yeah. Less about brands that are unlock the next version of you, the next 10x version of yourself so that you can make $1 billion. I'm it's not about that for me, because that may not be my path, but it's more about how can I, at the end of the day, Lisa, it's simple. How can I be the best dad I can be? How can I be good at what I do? Because I do care a lot about excellence. How can I be a great husband? And how can I be a good person in the world? Knowing that the rest of those things likely follow behind it.
Yeah, they will. And I think when we chase success as a dollar sign, those people who do that, we know they get there. They're terribly disappointed. They feel like they've been lied to, right? Because the rest of
terribly disappointed / if we're just speaking about church for a minute, I saw there's another mega church pastor when he was 21. He was doing something with a underage. Like and he looks like he's in his 50s or 60s. Like just the fall from grace, you get to this level of something, and that's the Hillsong story is the perfect example. Like,
yes.
Arguably the most famous pastor in the country, like completely crashed and burned.
Yeah.
Had everything.
Yeah. And I think, again, it's that image of what they feel like they're told to do, and this conditioning that we face. Someone, I can't remember where I read it, but, we spend all these years learning and doing what everybody else tells us to do. And then we get to a certain point in our life and we kind of wake up, which I think happened for a lot of people during COVID. They're like,
oh my gosh,
what am I doing? Right. And so then you spend the rest of your life unraveling that and coming full circle back to who you were created to be when you got here. So
I love that, Lisa. I will say one thing that's it's not a trigger for me. It doesn't bother me, but I will almost never buy is a system or a framework to do a certain thing.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is my personality is I'm like an inner or outward rebel. I don't like being told what to do. My human design chart. So this would make sense, but also there are certain things you can tell me how to do better, right? Like there are certain things in life, but if you're going to tell me your 7-step way to unlock my potential, I'm going to go, no, you're not.
Right.
Like, if you want to teach me like how to use technology better or how do you come up with a good marketing plan, sure. But I see these brands that are like, here's my patented way of like unlocking your spiritual mastery. I'm like, how could you possibly do that for me without knowing anything about me? There's no way this works for everybody.
Right. And I think too, what you're doing when you're buying that, you're buying the way they did it, but is there space? Is there flexibility where you bring in this wrinkle? And as you talk about human design, which by the time this podcast airs, that you've already, my listeners have already heard about human design. I think that's the thing. And one of the reasons why I love it so much, because it comes back to, okay, this is who you were created. Like this is who you were designed to be. And so when you start walking outside of that, doing what an organization tells you that you have to do based on fear, or where, a career tells you that you have to do this or you won't climb the ladder. And when those things feel off to you and icky and strange and, oh, you got to show up on social media every day and, oh, yeah, I don't want to do that. Like there's a reason why you have those feelings. It's because that's not in alignment with who you are.
That's right. Yeah, there's clues there.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
So I do want to get into, because I don't want to end this podcast without going into this a little bit, is a couple of weeks ago, you showed up at our mastermind, and we usually do a, like what's going on with you, a catch up with everybody. And you talked about this men's retreat.
Yes.
And I am running into more and more men that are talking about being in groups of men, learning how to connect back to themselves, since we were just talking about human design. Tell me a little bit about what led you, like why was this a point to jump off on that, and a little bit about the event.
Yeah, I'm gonna call it out by name, and I'm gonna give these gentlemen a plug. They're friends of mine, and they do phenomenal work. At Bob Conlin and Alex Terranova, they run their company is called Alchemy of Men, and I love, and for those who know what alchemy is, it's the taking of various things and creating something new. So their whole thing is we take who we come as, we come in as we are, and we come out with something new. It's brilliant. They run a very low cost weekly men's group called The Torch, where as a man, you show up, and each month we have different topics. Like 1 month will be like spirituality, money, and we just talk, and we have a tiny little lesson, and then we just share as men anything we want. And we have dads like myself, we have people that are getting divorced, we have people that don't have kids, we have young, we have old. And through being in that group for over a year, I realized like I coach mostly women. Our mastermind's more women. Maybe not so much, but like I have a lot of women in my life, including I'm married to a woman. I have a 8-year-old daughter. Women are more open to coaching generally. Like the statistics are 78%, at least the last ICF survey, 78% of all coaches in the United States are women. I led a coach training program. I went through a coach training program. A lot of women in my life. I love women. And I would say I have stronger relationships with women generally as friends, because I like, you know me, like I'm happy to go shallow, or I like to just talk. So shallow, middle, deep. And I was just missing like guys that I think most guys care, but most guys, we come with a shield, with our suit of armor around us, including me, of the role we're supposed to play in the world. So to go back to that, I joined the Torch, and I've known Bob for a few years. He's a brilliant, brilliant coach. And they started running retreats. And it was, you know, my personality, Lisa. Bob's like, hey, what kind of details? I'm like, I don't need any details. When is it, man? I'm like, as soon as I can make it happen, that my wife isn't traveling, I'm there. And so for me, the first opportunity was March in Utah. Myself and 6 other guys that I knew and 18 other guys I didn't know. We all showed up on this mountaintop in this beautiful house and spent 3 days doing the most challenging work I've ever done. And I've done a lot of challenging personal development work. The requirement is really simple. You need to identify as a man. That's it. So we had some gay men. We had men of color. We had an 81-year-old man who came because his son had done it the time before. And I was like, that's amazing. 81. And the guy's like spending his time, money, and energy to like, at 81, you don't have to work on yourself. Like and we're like, dude, you don't have to work on yourself. He's like, no, but I want to.
Yeah.
And then we had some guys in their late 20s, early 30s. So you had this wide range. We all identify as men. And we spent 3 days really getting vulnerable about what it means to be a man and how it stops us from who we really want to be in the world, based on the provider, the stoic in the house, and man, I'll tell you, Lisa, this will not surprise you at all. There's some guys that come in there with some really heavy stuff, like incredibly, incredibly traumatic therapeutic things, incredibly traumatic divorces, loss of spouse, cancer, all these things. And like, most men, like some included, we're supposed to be tough. We're supposed to be tough. And what we're left with is sitting by ourselves. It's never good enough. Like, that's been my experience with myself. It's never good enough because I'm left here with myself. And so what we did there is we without going into the details, because I want everybody who's a man to join and experience it. And I'm going back in October, by the way. It's in Austin, Texas. We looked at a variety of topics. I'll give you some of the topics. We talked about sex, men and sex. We talked about our relationship to money, but we don't talk about making more money. We talk about our relationship to money. We talk about what it means to be a man and what we learned about money. We looked at shame. We looked at guilt. We looked at, we did something where, like, who's somebody in your life that you have something that's unsaid that clear that space. It's so powerful. We looked at, and I will share this thing from Mark Hunter, who is another person in that cohort. He helps run the groups. Another brilliant, brilliant coach. He did this thing that was just an incredible experience for us. And the movie Platoon, there's a scene with Willem Dafoe's character. And for the audience listening, if you have seen Platoon, a reminder, he's the good guy. Willem Dafoe is like the good guy in the movie. Tom Berenger is the bad guy. And there's a scene near the end of the movie where Willem Dafoe is running through the jungle and Tom Berenger is running through the jungle. And they say, hey, he's out there. And Tom Berenger is running, and they're running, and they stop and they look at each other. And Tom Berenger smiles, and Willem Dafoe smiles, and then Tom Berenger stops smiling. He raises his rifle and he shoots him. And they're in a platoon together. It's because he was reporting on him. It was going to be a big problem. And they stopped the movie, and I'm like, what are we doing? He goes, where have you done that to the good part of yourself? And then we had a journal for 10 minutes, and it was like, and then we got a chance to share, and you hear like this, like tremendously powerful because in these groups you own in the space that it's all normal. You own it's normal. Hey, it's normal as a guy that you're going to kill a part of yourself. Where did you learn? And people would start, where did I learn that? I learned that from my dad because he hit me when I talked too much. I learned that as going to church every Sunday, that if I did a certain thing a bad way, I'm a quote unquote bad person. So I can't do that way. And so those are some of the examples of things we do. And one of the things I love about how Bob and Alex run this, it's always an invitation, never an expectation. They're going to push you. They're going to challenge you to share. They're going to challenge you to do the work. But it's not like you go and, it's like, you're not volunteering as tribute in front of a room. where it's like, okay, Jason, your turn to get up and bare your deepest, darkest secrets in front of a room full of strangers. And I think women naturally know this more. Obviously don't have this experience, but the amount of power that can be generated by 25 dudes in a room getting vulnerable with each other about how hard it is sometimes, it was unbelievable. Unbelievable to have every guy in there. And we had guys that have done very well for themselves. We have guys that are struggling, and to have everybody go, man, it's hard. Man, I feel bad about myself. I have shame. I feel like a fraud. And then to like reframe, but it's not all about like digging up the dirt, the bad. It's also about reframing. Like, what are you committed to? Who do you want to be in the world? Who do you want to be for your wife or for your husband, your kids? Who do you want to be for the world? What's the big impact? What's the next thing for you? And then we have fun as dudes. We're in a house of 25 dudes. It is, I will say, I'm going to be very frank about it. There is no lewd material, no self-pleasuring, no drugs, no alcohol. Period.
During yes.
Get rid of all that stuff. We also don't really no phones in the work, which I love, and also no talking about what you do.
Oh wow, that would be a major line
for guys. For guys. Yeah, what's over? Oh, hey, nice to meet you. What do you do? And it's a rule not to like. Of course, at the end of the day, you learn what people do, but it is to set the intention that as men we practice talking about how we feel about things.
Yeah,
how we feel about things. So, one of the prompts to kick off when we're taking the van up to the lodge was, "What are you here for? What are you passionate about? Tell me about your family. Tell me about some of the things you struggle with. Not, hey, did you see the game last night? Who are you voting for in the election in November? And what do you do for a living?"
Right. Those tend to be the acceptable topics, right?
Yeah. I think for women as well, but women, it's just more societally it's more of a norm in the United States for women to go a little bit deeper. And for men, it's like, it's so easy to get. And I come from the Midwest, which weather, sports. What are you doing this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. Weather, sports. What are you doing this weekend?
Weather, sports. What are you doing this weekend? Oh, are you going to church? Oh, you going to the picnic? Oh, what do you bring to the picnic? Like very surface level, because you don't want to get too deep, because that opens up the possibility you can be hurt. So that's all without going into the details. Really, if this resonates for any men out there, I'm not selling anything. It is not my thing. It is powerful. And if you feel a call to connect with the other thing, Lisa, is imagine what it takes for 25 men to opt in to multiple thousands of dollars in 3 days in Utah from around the world. We had people from around the world. There's a commitment there. This is not a online mastermind that's a couple $100. This is we have left our families and spent money, and it's not exorbitant, but it's enough money to matter. And we've spent the money and left our families and got on planes to do this work. Everybody's already opted in by doing that. No, and they know what it is. It is not hey, we're going to the mountaintop to like hang out and have a snowball fight. It's like, no, we know going in, like, this is serious work, but also a ton of fun too. Like a lot of fun. So that's a little bit about the alchemy of men stuff.
Yeah. Well, the transformation that I could just sense from you coming out of it, and we've had a conversation before about it, which is why I wanted you to talk about it here on the podcast. But this is something that I have really noticed. You work with a lot of women. I work with a lot of men with my clients. Kind of funny how that works out, isn't it? But one thing, I've always seen that is, I saw my father be the strong one in the family, the provider. I have a husband. I've got a son. I've got 2 little grandsons who I know, I dedicate part of my work of caring for them because I want to plant seeds, my legacy into them as I bring them up. And one thing that I really care about is when we tell little boys, suck it up, don't cry, don't be whiny, don't be like a girl, just get over it. Those messages that we plant, particularly when you're in those younger years, is why we have men who have the need to show up aggressive, or their biggest fear is they're going to be found out to be an imposter, right? So my heart really goes out to you. Yeah, in that situation, because it's almost like you don't have permission to share your feelings or be emotional.
Yeah.
So that's why I love these groups coming
and
together.
it's learned behavior.
Yeah.
Yeah,
really
and it's
is.
learned behavior. A couple of other things I'll say to wrap this up is one, the greatest testimony you could ever had. I came home sharing my wife about it. I said, I'd really like to go back in August and to Austin in October. She goes, yes, please. That was like it was like a yes. Like I'll be gone for 3 days. It'll cost so much. She's like, yes. Like, because I think she's seen a shift there. And the other thing I would offer for any women listening, and I've heard this from lots of guys that go, I don't think that's for me. Maybe not, but I would offer for men and women to explore that a little bit more. What is it about? And I'm not talking about alchemy men. I'm talking about like Alex and Bob only work with men in their private practice as one-on-one client. That's their calling. It's not mine. Is what is it about therapy or coaching or personal development that's not for you? What is it actually that's not for you? Because I felt that way at one time as well. I think looking back, I did. And it's opened up my world. So I just encourage anybody who has a feeling of like, oh, I can't make the time, can't make the energy. I'm like, well, can you make the time to be miserable for the next 40 years? Because I mean, you know, this as a coach too, like we're always making a choice for something.
Right.
We're always making a choice for something. And whatever you decide, there's no wrong in it, but there's always another place to like expand and look as well and see what's actually going on there. Like, oh, therapy isn't for me. Why not? Because I don't need it. Why not? Coaching isn't for me. Oh, going to a men's retreat, that sounds bad. Well, why? Like, you know, like, but question it not with an agenda of convincing, but like genuinely understand. I hear this from women. They're like, I would love for my husband to do something like that, but he's just not into that sort of thing. Like, what's he into? Oh, just like working. Okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Fine.
And I think some of that too is, you know, working is an escape from recognizing, like being who you are, finding out who you are. So I think there is a fear in there of going into getting uncomfortable, and we don't like to feel uncomfortable. But as you and I know, that when you dip your toe into that water of uncomfortable, you can immediately pop out on the other side with calling out what it is and seeing it's not as bad as what you thought it was. I think this idea, this anxiety we have about this thing being so big, once you recognize it and call it out and name it and you can move through it, you know, there's just so much more in life. So Jason, such a great conversation today. I know we can talk all day long. But I know you do have a free resource for our listeners.
I do. Yes. I've got how to drive better performance with your team through there's some coaching frameworks. I don't like the term techniques because they're not just as simple as using them, but it's around ways to listen differently. Some things that I learned through my coach training and that I use with my clients that I think leaders can use. I'll give you a link that you can put that in so it's completely free. And I think it's pretty high value. I think it's high quality. And I trust that it's going to provide value to you. So if you're interested in learning about different ways to listen or different ways to help engage and drive performance, and I don't just mean like numbers and performance, but like performance can be happier performance, better culture. That's available on my website and also in the link that Lisa's going to put in the show notes.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And Jason, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks, Lisa. It's a pleasure to be on.
All right. And so for those of you that are with us every week, or whether this is your first time, I hope you got what you needed. Go chase your passion. It will lead you to purpose and will help you show up as that personal brand of integrity. It's how you live a life of so much more on the way to becoming your legendary self. Thanks.